How's it going? Dr. J here, and today I'll be bringing you the first half of my Samus matchup guide. In this video, I'll be outlining what makes different opponents better or worse against Samus, and I'll be including a few tips for each matchup. Of course, this is all just my opinion, and I'm not going to go super in-depth on every single character on the roster, as there are some matchups I simply don't get to play as often as others, so feel free to comment any tips or suggestions you would add. So I feel like people still underestimate Samus's potential in a lot of matchups, and I really don't think Samus is anywhere below mid-tier in that regard. Ultimate is only a few months old, and patches and new characters are coming, so the meta hasn't really settled in any way. And like a lot of other characters, a lot of Samus's kit is still not entirely optimized, meaning top Samus players haven't yet mastered the character well enough in this engine and meta to really show how viable she is as a main, or maybe better for top level play, a dual main or counterpick character. Anyway, in this video I'm going over the matchups that I feel are unfavorable for Samus, and I'll be covering some even matchups as well. Let's start off with probably the hardest counter to Samus, Fox. Fox straight up beats Samus in close quarters, and while he does like to jump a lot, his fall speed is fast enough to punish any of your whiffed attacks. While Samus has a pretty good advantage state over Fox, and she can knock him out pretty early, and edgeguard and ledge trap Fox pretty easily, but Samus gets up-aired to death by Fox just as easily. With his mobility and mix-ups, Fox is practically designed to take on Samus in this game. His shine as a reflector is actually not as good as you'd think, because it can be mind-gamed around at top-level play, but shine can lead to an early gimp on Samus, especially if he tries to catch her tether grab recovery. So overall, I think this matchup is clearly in Fox's favor, but it's doable if Samus is much more familiar with the matchup. Projectiles aren't really that effective because of his speed and everything, so you kind of have to just stuff him out with tilts. Overall, the Fox matchup is probably worse for Samus than it was in Melee, but it's not quite as bad as it was in Smash 4. Pikachu's quick attack is amazing for getting in on Samus. Neutral B or Thunder Jolt effectively harasses and keeps up with Samus's projectiles. Pikachu is one of the few characters that can effectively edgeguard Samus. Pikachu makes it hard for Samus to land in disadvantage. At close range, Samus gets rushed down, and Pikachu is a small target that can weave around Samus's attacks. Samus really relies on playing a mostly defensive game against Pikachu, with down tilt, dash attack, F tilt, and up B out of shield being notably good moves for punishing Pikachu, but Pikachu's disadvantage state is honestly really good. And aside from down tilt, F smash, a bomb to down air combo, or a charge shot to catch Pikachu's landing, which are all pretty read reliant and punishable on whiff, you're gonna have a hard time trying to find an opening for a KO move as Samus. Charge shot is pretty important in this matchup, and she almost has to rely on it along with defensive tilts and simply trading with Pikachu in order to capitalize on her significantly better survivability, and while it's still only about 60-40 in Pikachu's favor, it's overall really tough. I don't think Wolf is nearly as good as Fox against Samus due to his significantly worse mobility, but Wolf's neutral game, ledge trapping, and juggling against Samus warrants him being up here. Samus gets knocked out pretty easily by Wolf as well, and Samus doesn't get knockouts on Wolf nearly as easily since Charge Shot is less reliable with Reflector, but her only real advantages in this matchup are that she can get some nasty juggles and edge guards in, but Wolf can do that too. So not only do you have to win neutral more often, but you also have to try and punish harder than Wolf. Zair is generally your best bet for creating openings. Roy against Samus in Smash 4 was arguably in Samus's favor, as Roy's juggles on Samus weren't that punishing, since he had to space his up airs and thus use the weak hitbox at the tip of his sword, and his mobility wasn't good enough to reliably chase her down through her zoning. Now, however, Roy is way faster in every way, and thus destroys Samus if he gets below her. He can reliably knock her out and edgeguard her, and he basically dictates the pace of the match, meaning as Samus you have to be on your toes and constantly react with defensive tilts, bombs, zairs, etc., and always capitalize on those stray hits by pushing your pretty strong advantage state against him. Once you get him off stage, it's pretty easy to finish him off, but actually getting him there is tough. I, like most Samus players, hate playing against Palutena, as her punishes are absolutely devastating, and with her new counter you almost have to grab in a lot of situations, which leaves you wide open if you whiff. However, it's not nearly as bad as the Fox or Pikachu matchups, since Palutena gets punished really heavily by Samus, as Samus easily gets KOs from down tilt, up air, and screw attack, and Palutena is a huge target for Zairs. Overall, it's just not fun though. Definitely switch to the offense against Palutena every once in a while though. Palutena doesn't dictate the pace of the match nearly as much as the other characters I just mentioned, so feel free to go in if you see an opening. Even though Pichu is smaller than Pikachu, which is an advantage, I don't think Pichu is as good against Samus as Pikachu. Two of Pikachu's strongest tools, Quick Attack and Thunder Jolt, or Up Special and Neutral Special, are not as good because Quick Attack on Pichu doesn't do any damage, and Pichu can't really win the camping war as much because of the self-damage she inflicts. Also, despite Pichu having a small hurt box, Samus gets knockouts off of down tilt, up B, up throw, her smashes, and even F tilt really early on Pichu. So you can play a war of attrition against Pichu as Samus, slowly using bombs and tilts to whittle down and zone out Pichu until they're around 80 or 90% and then get an easy knockout. Pichu's short hitboxes also make her more susceptible to Samus's best out of shield options, up B and up air. Mewtwo is traditionally pretty good against Samus, as a Shadow Ball, tilts, and side special do very well against Samus's tilts and charge shot, but he's such an easy target for Zairs and aerials, and Mewtwo gets KO'd really early, so it's not as bad as people think. Also, Samus can do all the fancy B reversing things that Mewtwo could do in the air, which is pretty nice I guess. Anyway, Zair is extremely important in this matchup, as it outranges Mewtwo's tail and keeps out aerial pressure. Young Link is an absolute pain, because not only do his projectiles easily contend with all of Samus's zoning, minus her fully charged neutral B, but Young Link's gameplay is inherently dangerous to Samus. A lot of Young Links like to spot dodge whenever they do something on shield or read a grab, and this makes it so that Samus has to read whether or not Young Link will spot dodge, or he can easily whiff punish Samus's laggy grab, down tilt, etc. Also, Young Link's combos are really good against Samus, and the only disadvantage that Young Link has is that he loses trades and has to get a solid setup to find a KO. Pokemon Trainer is also inherently dangerous, as Squirtle getting up in Samus's face is a problem, and Ivysaur's up air, juggles, and KOs, down air destroys Samus off stage and nullifies tether recovery, and Ivysaur's drifting fair and bear are really safe in neutral. Charizard gets absolutely bodied in every way by Samus, and both Squirtle and Ivysaur can be gimped, edge-guarded, or ledge-trapped, but this is definitely in Pokemon Trainer's favor. Bombs work really well against Squirtle though, and so does F-Tilt, and Ivysaur has problems with Zair and dealing with Samus's charge shot, so try and focus on those moves in neutral. Inkling has three very big advantages on Samus: a small hurt box, amazing mobility, and a very solid advantage state. Honestly, just hitting Inkling with Samus is a pain since you have to aim and time most of your neutral game moves perfectly to land them, and Inkling punishes Samus's whiffs hard. Inkling's dash dance and ground game makes landing a Zair really difficult, so Samus's counterplay mostly comes from using bombs and just generally slowing the game down to get your charge shot ready and take advantage of when Inkling is low on ink and thus needs to land. A good Inkling won't let that happen very often, but because they need to be on the ground a lot, I find charge shot really helpful here. Greninja has the same advantages as Inkling in his low profile and excellent mobility, and his up airs and up tilts are a problem for Samus. This is a deceptively hard matchup for Samus, and like Inkling, you often need to slow things down a bit. Also, it's worth noting that Greninja's counter can hit you even if you land a Zair or a projectile, so watch out for that, especially when recovering. Also, while Water Shuriken isn't as powerful as Charge Shot in my opinion, it's kind of like Melee Sheik's Needles in that it can sort of do everything and definitely disrupt Samus's zoning. I haven't gotten to play against too many good Greninjas, so I don't know the best tips for this matchup, but it's sort of similar to playing against Inkling in terms of general strategy. Yoshi's double jump armor is difficult to deal with this Samus, and while Samus's anti-air game is strong, Yoshi's air mobility, juggling, and the ability to KO off the top with up air puts Samus at a disadvantage here. Back air is a great knockout move here to catch and outspace things like Yoshi's Nair or Bear, and up air is good for sharking from below. Also, landing charge shot and even missiles is easier than you'd think because double jumping for Yoshi is a bit of a commitment, so you can catch their landings pretty easily if you read their drift. A good Yoshi will try to be right on top of you most of the time, but Samus can prevent this with spaced F-tilts, bomb traps, and good nairs, up airs, and screw attacks, especially out of shield. Be wary of his command grab though, and don't be shielding all the time, because Yoshi can mix you up pretty easily. Game & Watch's bucket is not as good as people think, but he is a threat. More importantly for Game & Watch, his up air juggling and space nairs and bears give Samus a very tough time. Also, it's tough to get up air juggles on him due to Game & Watch's down air. He gets knocked out in just a few good hits from Samus though, and his moves are relatively laggy aside from back air, which loses to Zair in neutral, so Samus can punish him hard. A bit in Game & Watch's favor, but not as bad as you'd think. I know Olimar's Pikmin stop projectiles and all that, but Samus can still outcamp Olimar and knock him out pretty easily, so it's doable. His small hurtbox isn't a huge deal because of his lack of mobility, and he doesn't knock Samus out that easily unless he lands a purple Pikmin smash attack, or gets a grab at a high percent. Save your charge shot while in neutral so that you can use it to punish techs or as a follow-up / finisher to a combo. And only use bombs for ledge trapping, recovery, or to block out thrown Pikmin, as Olimar will rarely voluntarily get close enough to be hit by one himself. Nothing that Samus usually does to Olimar is very punishable, unlike a lot of characters that struggle with things like his up smash out of shield. Honestly, as long as Olimar doesn't get the lead and start camping, you can just play a safe neutral game with projectiles and Zair and it shouldn't be a problem. Rosalina and Luma are still a bit of a threat to Samus with her projectile absorb, dash attack, and fair, but her recovery is easily covered by Samus's bombs, and Samus has no problem knocking Luma out, so it's not bad. Rosa has a similar hurtbox and weight to Mewtwo, so Zairs are great in neutral, and Samus has no problem knocking her out and winning trades. Lucas is actually better than Ness against Samus in my opinion. For one, Lucas's PK Fire is better than Ness's against Samus, and his PK Thunder is kind of slower, so it actually helps to get through Samus trying to air dodge or morph ball to dodge it. Landing against Lucas is really tough as Samus, but she doesn't struggle to knock him out. Her missiles don't get absorbed by his down B, and she has a blast edge guarding and ledge trapping him. Lucas is another character that I haven't played that many great opponents who play him, so I usually find that Samus's just general neutral strategy works well against Lucas. Like Lucas, Isabelle is better than Villager against Samus in my opinion, due to a number of reasons besides her fishing rod being better than his Lloyd Rocket against Samus. Isabelle is more mobile, her down tilt and dash attack are faster, her F tilt has more range, and her up air and down air are more reliable. Pocket can be annoying, but it's not a huge deal, just don't randomly throw out charge shot in neutral. Also, Isabelle's pretty fragile, so Samus easily wins trades and has a much easier time knocking out. She does have a bit of a problem getting back to stage though. Wario is a weird matchup, because in theory Samus's anti-air and projectile game should completely zone Wario out, but the problem with Wario is his ability to punish whiffs and his waft. Basically, the longer you camp as Samus, the more Wario gets waft, and Wario's up air and up tilt not only juggle Samus like crazy, but they also lead into a waft, which puts Samus down a stock pretty much automatically. Also, his heavy weight is really annoying for Samus, and he's pretty hard to get. Mega Man can be tricky because his F tilt and nair really disrupt Samus's game plan, and his up air can be just as annoying as Game & Watch's, but up close Samus wins. The problem is, if Mega Man has the lead, you basically have to approach him, which is just what he wants. Samus really likes being at really far range or really close range in this matchup, but when you're just barely in his pellet range, he has a major advantage. I already mentioned Villager when I talked about Isabelle, but basically, Villager has to play much more campy, which plays to Samus' strengths. He can also juggle her pretty easily, and while I absolutely hate this matchup, it's just frustrating, not very difficult. Chrom off stage is food for Samus. I know I said Roy is really good against her, but Samus doesn't have nearly as much of a problem against Chrom because his disadvantage state is absolutely terrible. And while Samus gets juggled really easily, it takes a lot of up airs to kill her, while Samus's bombs make approaching for Chrom very dangerous, as a single bomb can lead to an attack that pushes Chrom off stage, leading to his eventual demise by edge guarding and ledge trapping. Frankly though, Chrom and Samus body each other, so it's pretty even. Snake obviously likes to camp and fight a war of attrition, which Samus does a bit better than Snake in my opinion. Nikita and grenades stop her charge shot, sure, but shooting Nikita in pretty much any position is risky, because Samus can dodge it and punish it with a charge shot. Plus, Samus's up air and up B are broken on Snake, and if you can master getting bombs, down tilts, and spikes on the ledge, then his recovery is easily exploited. Pit and Dark Pit can harass Samus from afar with arrows, which Pit is better at, and they can juggle and edge guard the heck out of her. However, Pits like to be in the air and Samus likes to use anti-air attacks, plus Samus outtrades and KOs the Pits, so it's pretty even. Pit does probably have to win more neutral exchanges though. As I mentioned earlier, Ness isn't as good as Lucas against Samus, and his short range outside of PK Fire, which can be punished easily, is a problem for him. Also, anytime he tries to PK Thunder across you while you're recovering, you can unload a charge shot in his face, getting him a third of the way to kill percent in one shot. Plus, his recovery is even worse than Lucas's, so he's got some issues and disadvantage. Robin can be pretty tough for Samus in my experience. Sure, you can play around their book's ammo or whatever, but the neutral game is pretty even and they both do heavy damage to each other, so overall, neither has a significant advantage. I do think that stages with platforms like Battlefield sort of give the edge to Samus in this matchup. Toon Link is a problem for Samus in the same ways that Young Link is, but his universally less effective Nair and arrows makes this about even. Also, Toon Link has better air mobility, which you would think would help against Samus, but it also means that Toon Link likes to be in the air more than Young Link, and he has a slower fast falling speed, so it could almost be seen as a disadvantage against Samus's control over airspace. Falco's Reflector is not as bad for Samus as his lasers, which do an excellent job of disrupting Samus's charge and aerials, but both lasers and Reflector lose to Zair. Also, Falco does have more trouble than Samus at KOing in this matchup, and Falco's close range is really not that effective against Samus, and she's also kinda hard to combo. Zero Suit is pretty much forced to approach against Samus, and with her nerfs to up air, up special, down throw, and tether recovery, this matchup is much easier than it was in Smash 4. Samus has a much easier time getting knockouts than Zero Suit, and Samus can ledge trap and edgeguard Zero Suit very effectively. I really don't have too much to say about this matchup because I don't think it's that difficult, or really unique, I guess, aside from the fact that they both have Zair and a long tether grab, but honestly if you're just safe and win neutral, you should win it. Mario was already relatively even with Samus in Smash 4, but with his nerfs to up tilt and ladder combos, Samus can now at least go even in this matchup. She wins trades, outspaces him, has an easier time knocking out, and can outcamp him despite his cape. He has to go pretty far out with a back air to get a solid edgeguard against Samus, as a recovery and up air making getting the oh so sought after fair spikes and flood gimps very difficult to get against Samus. Cloud's nerfs to limit and his aerials are a huge boon for Samus, and she can basically force his approach with projectiles to stall limit and whiff punish his laggier moves. Bombs play an important role in this matchup, not just because they act as a close range trap and set up for combos, but also because they completely destroy Cloud's recovery, and they cause really good ledge trap situations for Samus. You kind of have to play passively in this matchup as Samus, to play around limit and all that, but even if you play aggressively, it's still pretty even. This may seem a bit controversial, but I think that Marth and Lucina can't deal with Samus nearly as well as Roy can. They thrive on spacing fairs and dash dancing for approaching, so they get anti-aired by Samus's Zair, and they're basically forced to approach Samus, which plays against Marthina's weaknesses and for Samus's strengths. They can juggle Samus for days, but overall I feel like Samus wins the neutral game and the punish game in this situation. Okay, so Peach and Daisy are generally just top tier, and her combos, shield pressure, and edge guarding makes this a bit tough for Samus. But Samus's Zair and Fair are great for covering the areas that Peach and Daisy like to float in, and Samus's tilts can outspace most flow cancelled aerials. So of course Peach destroys Samus when she gets in, and turnips are a problem, but honestly she has a really tough time getting in. You have to play lame in this matchup to really stand a chance, but hey, it's a top tier. Do whatever it takes to beat them. That's all for this video. Stay tuned for the second half of my Samus matchup guide, and probably a video on Joker in the next day or two. Peace.